Hey everybody, my name is Frank. This is the PothOnProgramming video log, and today we're doing part 14 of the Stay Down devlog. In this video, I'm going to be doing a ton of code refactoring, which is super exciting, I know, but technically if you watch the whole thing, you can see me write literally the entire game from scratch, every line of code. Super boring for most people. Probably not going to do this format again, but you can definitely learn something from it. The main feature of today's video is going to be drawing the tile background. So I went ahead and already imported the graphic for that. It's just a little tile set. It has 3 tiles in it. It looks the same pretty much, but when you take these 3 tiles and kind of mix them up and draw them randomly across a background, it adds a nice random looking tile background that is going to make this game look a lot nicer. So let's see here. The first thing that I'm going to do before I do anything is fix this error in my console, because I'm actually using Firefox today instead of Chrome, and Firefox does not like it when you don't tell it what char set you're using. So to fix this, if you have this problem, this error in your browser when you're running in Firefox, all you got to do to fix it is put a meta tag in to tell the browser what the char set is. So we're just going to say meta char set equals UTF-8. I think that should do it. Save. Let's see if we get rid of that. Yeah, cool. So whatever your char set is, just throw it in. Firefox will like that. All right, so let's go ahead and just talk about some of the refactoring I'm going to do before I jump into it. The first thing, I'm going to be getting rid of some unnecessary files. So the renderer.js file, I'm going to be getting rid of that. Also, the game state file, I'm going to be getting rid of that too. And the reason I'm getting rid of these is because they just feel redundant to me. For example, the renderer.js file, all it does is put a wrapper function called drawImage around the canvas's drawImage function. So I have a function called drawImage wrapping a function called drawImage, and I am cutting down on the number of parameters you need to pass, but I don't think that's that valuable. And seeing as this is going to be one of the main things that we call in our render loop, I want to cut back on wrapper functions or unnecessary function calls. If I had some fancy stuff for the renderer to do, which is what I anticipated initially when I first started this project, probably would keep it and just have a bunch of other functions in here, but I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. So let's go ahead and delete it. Oh. Delete that, move it to the trash. And this one, the reason I want to get rid of this is because the only purpose it really serves is creating an object with these methods, and I have to pass these methods in anyway. So let's take a look at one of my actual game state objects. We'll take a look at pause. So all this does is at the bottom of my pause game state, I'm going to create an object that has all these methods, and I define the methods in the pause game state right here. What I could do instead is this. Instead of returning a new game state object, I can just return an object literal that has all those methods. It achieves the exact same end goal. The only difference is if you're using like TypeScript or something, it would probably generate I think an interface file. I'm not really familiar with TypeScript, but essentially it would generate a file kind of like the game state file, just as a placeholder for that type, because TypeScript has types. JavaScript does not, so there's really no reason for this. At the end of the day, all this does is create an object, and you could just as easily do that with an object literal here. So I would much rather do that and have one less file to deal with than just have like an unnecessary kind of redundant file that I need to keep track of. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for the run game state. Save, and then I'm going to come up here and just delete this. Move to trash. The other thing that I need to do is make sure that I'm removing those, so I'm not trying to load them up. So got rid of renderer, got rid of game state, save, and let's see how bad it's broken. Okay, renderer is undefined, of course, because it doesn't exist anymore essentially. So inside of the run game state, we're going to have a problem. First, let's go ahead and just fix our main.js file. All right, so we no longer have this variable for renderer. We're not going to be needing the methods to get and set it. So set renderer, we can get rid of that. Where is get renderer? I'm sure that's in here somewhere. Get rid of get renderer. Save. Refresh. Probably not really going to have any changes. Undefined has no properties. Run JS 114. Another thing I'm going to be doing is getting rid of the destructuring. The destructuring is cool, but I think I would rather just have all getters and setters. So I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of this altogether. That's really going to break stuff. So I'm really breaking this. So we're going to probably run into some troubleshooting and a whole bunch of other stuff. Stay down.getRenderer is not a function at run.js 5 line 30. Of course it's not, because we just deleted the file and got rid of that reference inside of staydown.js. Okay, so item is not defined. We're gonna get a whole bunch of problems. Let's go ahead, take a sip of water, and in the main file, try to get ahead of this a little bit. So one of the things I'm gonna do is pull all of this out of our object literal that we're returning, which becomes our stay down object. And I want to create an object to hold buffers. It's going to hold the display canvas. It's also going to hold our buffer image or our buffer canvas for the tile background. And I'm going to pull all of this stuff out, and the reason for that is I don't want to destructure anymore. I want to have getters and setters, so I don't have to do stuff like this inside of my initialize function. So in my initialize function for the game, essentially stay down the main file, I am pulling out the images object from the stay down object, which is the object I'm defining. This is kind of confusing. I was excited about destructuring objects. I was very excited about it. It's very cool. I think I got a little gung-ho with it. At least you learned about them. Now I'm going to take them out. So I'm no longer going to be taking images out this way. So let's go ahead and take images and just move it up to the scope here, this anonymous function scope. We're going to say const images is equal to an object. And you know what? I really don't need to define those there, because they're just undefined. So we're pulling that out. We're going to pull out pretty much everything else. We're going to pull out constructors. We don't need managers anymore. I think I got rid of that in the last video. States. We can get rid of these. We're going to fix a problem with change states. That is actually kind of an annoying problem, but I came up with a solution for it, so that's good. And now we're going to have getters and setters for all of this stuff. So except we don't want to define it in here because we're pulling everything out. So instead of defining your properties and methods on the actual object here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to define methods in this anonymous function scope. Function get constructor. We're going to get our constructors by name, and we're just going to return constructor's name. So if I want to get the item constructor, I'm just going to say stay down.getConstructor item, and it's going to give me my item object, or my item function that acts as a constructor for items. So that's pretty straightforward. We're going to do the same thing for state. Function get state name, return states name. Cool. We're going to do the same thing for images. Function get image name, return images name. So now if I want to get an image, say the Dominique image or the tile image, I'm just going to say get image, and I'm going to pass in the name. So that works. Let's see what else we can do. Oh, buffers. Let's make an object to hold all of our buffers. And all a buffer is just a canvas. It's just, I'm calling it a buffer, but it's just essentially a canvas where we're going to draw an image to, and it's going to just kind of keep that image in memory, and whenever we need it, we have it. We don't have to recreate it. It's just a buffer that's there for us to store some image information and redraw it whenever we feel like. So const buffers is going to be an object literal as well. Keep everything in alphabetical order. Satisfy my OCD. Let's get this stuff pulled out a little bit at a time. So we're going to pull this stuff out. Function change state. Function, I'll just copy this and paste it. Function get controller, function get display, function get engine, function get loader. The other thing we have to do if we want to make these accessible from the stay down object is actually come in here and just paste these in. Cool thing about ES6 is we don't have to do get image. We don't have to do that. That is valid syntax, but I'm pretty sure this is ES6. I could be wrong. All we have to do to pull these methods in is just literally copy their names and throw them in there. So that's pretty cool too. So we got those. We'll do change state as well. Move this up. Change state, we're going to do get controller, get display. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to make the display essentially a buffer. So display is going to be inside of our buffers object. So let's come over here and just get rid of display altogether. And inside of buffers, we're going to recreate our display as a buffer, because technically that's what it is. It's just an object, it's just a canvas that we draw to. It's just that this buffer is going to be drawn to all the time. All right, so now we're also going to create a background buffer. Create elements canvas. We're going to create another canvas the same way we did for the display buffer. Get the context. It's going to be a 2D drawing context. Alpha is false because it's going to be non-transparent, and desynchronize is going to be true. Desynchronized basically just desynchronizes the canvas from the, I think like from the DOM event tree. I could be wrong in saying that, but essentially what this does is your canvas will not be synced with CSS. If I were to do this for the display canvas, wrong mouse. If I were to do this for the display canvas, the CSS that scales it up probably wouldn't work because it would be out of sync. So I would be displaying my canvas before the CSS had a chance to be applied to that DOM element of the canvas. So keeping it synchronized is important when your elements are actually in the document object model and being displayed in the browser window. But for like an off-screen canvas or something, you probably want to set desynchronized to true. That might not always be the case, but for our purposes here, that's going to probably give us the best results. Alright, so from here, I just want to see if I can get this working. Let's see. We're just going to see how badly this is broken. Keep pulling stuff out of here, see if we can get it to work. These errors aren't really telling me anything. It's all from the run game state. Let's pull the initialize function out. Remember to put it back in there so we have access to it. Function initialize. See, and this is what I was trying to get rid of right here, this destructuring. I no longer need to pull in my states because I just have access to them. I have access to that constant state object right here. So I no longer need to destructure it out of the stay down object, which I think is kind of weird because you're defining the stay down object and you're referencing it inside of the definition. I don't really like that too much. We can also basically just get rid of this whole thing because we have access to change state as well. Alright, so now we have initialize, get engine, get loader. We need to put those in there. Get engine, get loader, initialize, set controller. These can also come out. So we're just going to do set controller, set engine, set loader. Pull these out. And now our return object is basically just getting references to those functions and returning that. So our object is going to be referencing all of these functions in the scope rather than having them directly defined on the object. So let's go ahead and put these in. I think these were set methods. So they'll go below this initialize method. Function set controller, function set engine, function set loader. Okay, cool. Let's see what we got. Something different. Stay down.constructors is undefined, and that is at rectangle2d.js. Okay, so let's see what the problem is. Over here in stay down.constructors, stay down.constructors.rectangle2d. Okay, so here what we're going to do is we're going to start using a function called stay down.set constructor. Set constructor. We're going to pass in the name of the constructor as a string, and then the value of that constructor property, because remember we're basically just adding a property to our constructor's object. This object up here, constructors, we're going to set that property to this value, which is an anonymous function which returns the rectangle2d constructor, and we're going to set that property name to rectangle2d. So let's go ahead and see if we can do that. I'm going to save this, and then I have to make a function called set constructor. So let's go ahead and make that function. We're going to have, I'm in the right file. Let's go to set constructor name comma function. Actually, this can probably be a one-liner. It's pretty simple. Constructors name equals function. Because we're returning a function, the constructor is a function. If we look at rectangle2d, we are defining it as a function, and what we're returning is a function. The reason I put a $sign in front of the word is because function is a reserved keyword, so I can't actually do that. That would be a problem. But what I can do is just slap this little guy in front. This way I can use the name I want for my parameter. I guess I could also say method. I guess I could also call it constructor. If you don't like that little $sign thing, go right ahead and just don't use it. I don't know if that's good practice or not. I'm just messing around with it, so seeing me write code live, so ideas are flying. I'm just putting them on the screen here. Alright, so this is a parameter. Don't know why I put it in quotes. Set constructor, we're also going to pull that into our stay down object that we're returning. Set constructor, save. Let's see what we get. We should get rid of that problem with the rectangle now, the rectangle 2D file. Staydown.constructors is undefined. Okay, so this, we're basically going to have to go through all of our constructors and apply this same fix that we did for the rectangle file. So let's go up to player, set constructor. The player constructor is going to be equal to this object that we're returning. Come down here, close off our parentheses. Do the same thing for all of these. Set constructor. We're going to set the platform constructor equal to the anonymous function call that produces the platform constructor. Save that file, come over to item, do the same thing. Set constructor, item, come down here. All right, save it. Let's see what we get now. We should get rid of these errors. Staydown.constructors is undefined at pause.js. Okay, so now we're into our pause game state. We're destructuring stuff again. Not really a big fan of that. Oh, we're trying to get the game state constructor, but it no longer exists. Also, we're trying to get the change state function, but we don't need to do it that way anymore. We could just say const change state equals stay down dot change state. Cool. Save. Let's see if we get that error anymore. Nope. Stay down dot states is undefined at pause.js 27 space 3 27. Huh, wait a minute. Oh, well, I'm no longer defining states. I'm trying to use states.run. This is something else I wanted to fix because it causes a huge problem here. I'll talk about why this is a problem and what it even is, because you're probably like, what am I even looking at this point? So when I'm pulling in my game states, first I pull in the pause game state, and then I pull in the run game state. So when I am defining the pause game state with the pause.js file, there is no way for me to get states.run. Like if I come in here and I say const run equals stay down dot states dot run, there's no way for me to get that because that hasn't even been created yet. So if I come over here and take a look, the run game state won't be created until, like, that object won't be created until this file is parsed. But this file will never be parsed until after pause is parsed. So I can't pull that definition into the pause game state because it hasn't been defined yet. You might think, well, just go ahead and do this. Just move it above. Well, that's not going to work because what if the run game state references pause? And it does. So I have a problem here where one of these files is going to have to do something different to reference the other. And I never liked that. So I came up with a fix for it, and that fix looks kind of like this. Instead of even defining a state, what we're going to do is we're just going to say change state, and we're going to make this, instead of an actual object reference to the run object, we're just going to put it in quotes. And now we're using a string to tell change state to change it to the state named run. So that's going to be a little different. So let's go ahead and change the function for change state. Where is it? Up here. Okay, so now state is actually going to be just a name of a state. If get state name. I don't think I have a function called get state. I do. Okay, so this, I defined this earlier just to get ready for it. So essentially what we're doing is we're getting the state with the name, which is just a string, from the states object. So now it doesn't matter what order we define our pause and run game states in, they're both going to work because at runtime those state objects will have been defined, and they will have been defined with the appropriate names that we're using to reference them by. So, okay, it's a mouthful. I need some water. Let's get Okay, so now, if a state exists, deactivate the state. All states have a deactivate method. Now we're going to set the state to get state by the state's name. Then we're going to activate that new state. Then we're going to set the state with the engine. All right, everything is looking good. Probably going to still be some broken stuff. Staydown.states is undefined. Staydown.states is undefined. Well, I defined it up here, but where is this problem occurring? At POS.js 27 line 3. Let's go up a little bit and see if there's another problem. Staydown.constructors is undefined at platform.js. Let's see, platform.js. Oh, yeah, okay. So this is going to change because we're no longer referencing constructors that way. We're going to have to use a getter or a setter. So I'm going to say rectangle 2D equals staydown.get constructor rectangle 2D. Kind of like that. I think it's a little easier to read. I know the whole destructuring was trying to make things easier to read, but honestly, for just one thing, it just doesn't make sense. And I'm pretty sure in the video where I made that change that I just deleted, I even said this doesn't make sense. So now I'm going back and fixing the problem that I created all those videos ago. So yeah, so like this right here, this is kind of weird to look at. It would make sense if I were destructuring a whole bunch of stuff out, but I'm not. So I'm just going to replace it with this, and I'm just getting one constructor with the get constructor function. Save. Item does it too. Item uses rectangle. In fact, all of these use rectangle, except for obviously rectangle. So let's go ahead and refresh and see what we get. Okay, still the pause game state. Staydown.states is undefined. Let's go back to the pause file and see what's causing this problem. We have our change state method. We are getting our controller. We have activate, deactivate, render, and update methods. We're saying if the controller the P button is active, controller.set P to false, change state run. There's no reason that this shouldn't work. However, what about the run game state? We really didn't go through the run game state and try to fix everything. So we need the change game state. Change state equals stay down dot change state. Oh, this is the problem. I completely overlooked the problem. So this is the problem right here. We're trying to directly access staydown.states. But remember we pulled all that stuff out of the return object. So now we're just returning this. There is no states object in what we're returning. Instead, what we have to do is use get state, set state. So let's go back to the run game state and pause game state, fix this. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say staydown.set state run. Ooh, what did I do? Run, and we're gonna just set it to the object returned by that anonymous function call. Save it. Let's go over to the pause game state. This is exactly the problem, and it's telling me the error is on line 27 space 3. I don't know if that's index 0, but basically it's here because that's the closure for this line here, where we're actually trying to set a property called pause on the states object, which doesn't exist inside of staydown anymore. So let's do staydown.set state, call it pause, function, we're going to close that off, save, and now we should be good. Staydown.set state is not a function. Well, we just need to go ahead and define it. So let's do set state, and then we need to come up here and define it. function set state name function, except it's not a function for this, it's an object. So object, I guess I should just call it state, but that would introduce a new problem because I have another variable up here called state. So let's just do object states name equals object. Cool. Let's save that, see if we fixed it. Hey, I think we fixed it, because now we're getting a totally new set of errors, which is going to plague us from here on out until we fix them. So stayDown.getDisplay is not a function. Well, that's because we intentionally deleted it in favor of this new buffers object way of doing things. So let's go to where this is occurring, run JS, and see. So what I'm going to do here is I'm still going to have display, but I'm going to do stayDown.getBuffer, and we're just going to get the display. So now we have display. StayDown.getBuffer is not a function because we haven't defined it, so let's define it. GetBuffer function, getBuffer name, return buffers name, save. Let's see if it works. StayDown.getBuffer is not a function. Oh, because we haven't pulled it into what we're returning yet. So let's do getBuffer, save that, refresh. Item is not defined. Probably because we're getting it the wrong way inside of the run game state. So let's go ahead and see if we can fix that. Item is a new item. Yeah, so we're not getting this the right way. I guess one way I could do it is just get the method to get constructors. Const get constructor equals stayDown.get constructor. And now anytime we want to get a constructor, we can just come in here and do I really like the way that works or looks. Alternatively, what you can do is you can say const item equals get constructor item, and you can still say item. I'm not sure what I'm gonna go with long term, but for now I'm gonna do it that way, and that's probably gonna just be the way it is. So let's see if that fixes our problem where item is not defined. Okay, so now we have the same problem with player, but the problem with item is fixed. So let's do player, and we're probably gonna have to do it for platform as well. Platform, save, refresh. Display is not defined. stayDown.js, line 59. Okay. Let's see what we got here. At line 59, document.by.appendChild buffers.display.canvas. Okay, so instead of just referencing display directly, now it's inside of the buffers object. Hey, we have a canvas back on the screen. Run is not defined as stayDown.js 61 line 7. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Okay, so instead of referencing the actual run game state object, we're just going to pass in a string for the name and hope it's there. Cool. All right. Render is not defined. So now we're actually getting back to like where things are working with the game. All of our structure is getting cleaned up, and now we're actually having problems with the game running. So let's go into the run game state and see what the problem is. Run.js 110. So line 110, we're trying to reference the renderer. which is no longer defined. So we're going to have to do display.drawImage. Because remember, we got rid of renderer because it was kind of redundant. All it was doing was calling the drawImage function on display. And this is how redundant it is. Like, I can literally just replace renderer with display, and I'm pretty sure it will work. Like, I'm pretty sure it's going to draw something. I don't think it's going to look right, but we can see what happens. It's taking a long time to load because the console is just filling up with errors. Let's see what we got. Images is not defined now. Okay, so we fixed that problem, but now images is not defined, and that's at line 110. Images.platform. I think for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have image equals, let's see, image, I'm going to set image equal to get image platform. And that, we might have to create that. But now from here on out, we just say image. And instead of this being at 110, it's probably going to jump down to 116. We might have to fix some more stuff first before we get that part working though. No, still at 110. Images is not defined. That's weird because there's not even there's no reference to something called images on that line. Get image is not defined. Okay, so yeah, so now we're down at 106. Get image is not defined. So let's go up to the top and say get image equals stay down dot get image. Save. I don't know if I defined it, but I think I did. Get image by name. We're just going to return the property of images that matches that name, and we have to make sure that we're naming it. So down here, we technically name all of our properties as we load them in. So these are going to be the names: Diamond, Dominique, Platform, Spike, and next I'll load Tile. So let's see what happens. Hey, we have our platforms. That's pretty cool. All right, so we have our platforms, they're back. That's pretty nice. Let's go ahead and get rid of these files up here because I don't think we need to reference them anymore. Go back into the run game state. Find the render function. All right, so now we just have this variable that stores our image. So we're just gonna get the platform image when we want to draw platforms. Here we can just directly call get image for the diamond. I'm trying to refresh as often as I can. This way I don't crash Firefox because it's just loading up with these errors. Okay, let's see. Get image diamond. We're going to do the same thing here. Get image. Save. Let's see if we get our player back. Why is that not working? Oh, I forgot to close parentheses. And there we go. All right, that works. Let's see, draw image, images.spike. This I'm going to replace with a buffer, but for now let's just do image equals get image spike. Save, see if our spikes come back. They do. Awesome. So at this point, we've basically fixed it with all of our refactors. Let's see if pause works. Pause doesn't work. All right, so why doesn't pause work? Let's see if we can fix pause by going to the update function. Okay, so here, instead of saying states.pause, we just need to say pause. Save, refresh, and pause. And unpause. Pause and unpause. Ooh, it's a little blurry. Caught it between frames or something like that. It's a little weird. Oh, you want to know why that's happening? It's because I'm no longer using my renderer objects draw image method, which will use math.floor on the positions of the images I'm drawing, so I'm gonna have to go back in and fix that. So let's go back into the render function, item X, item Y. This is why we're probably gonna have to use image for this. Image equals get image diamond, image XY, oh, actually, wait a minute, I don't have to do this. I'm forgetting how the signatures of the draw image method work. What I have to do is math.floor.item.x, math.floor.item.y, and then do the same thing for player. So down here, what I'll do is what we're trying to fix, if you look, you can see how there's like a blur around the image there. So we're going to fix that just by rounding it down. It's also going to improve our drawing performance a tiny bit. So now when I pause, it should be always crystal clear, and so far everything is good. Okay, cool. So yeah, so we can even still use this 3-parameter signature for the draw image method of the canvas. So no need for that render object that I had before. Got the spikes, we're drawing the spikes, we're drawing the ground. All right, cool. You know what? Let's go ahead and see if we can draw some tiles. So inside of the initialize function, I probably have a bunch of crap up here that I need to go through and figure out if I'm still using it, but honestly, it doesn't really look like it. So let's go ahead and just get the tiles drawn. First thing we need to do to draw some tiles is come in here and say, load up that tile image. So we got our tile image over here. It's just called tile.png. It's just a 3 tile set. So we're just going to do media/images/tile.png. Come down here. Images.tile equals images 4. Alright, so we're trying to load it up. Let's see what happens. Nothing happens yet. Let's make our buffer. So we're going to say buffers.background draw image images.tile 0 0. See what we get. We still have to draw the buffer, however. So let's go into here, into the run game state, come up to the top, import our buffer. Nah, I'm not going to import the buffer. I'm just going to import the getBuffer function, which I think I already did. Staydown.getBufferDisplay. Nah, you know what? Let's just do const. Actually, let's just get the getBuffer method. Do that at the top. GetImage. We'll do const getBuffer equals staydown.getBuffer. Okay, so now we have access to the getBuffer method. And down here in our render function, we are going to say, instead of filling the whole screen with this lighter gray, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this, save, see what we get. Okay, so we're no longer redrawing the background, so it kind of gives us this effect, kind of like at the end of Solitaire. If you ever play Solitaire and all the cards come down, they kind of stay rendered. Basically just stops redrawing the background. And that's the effect you get, which is pretty cool to look at for a bit, but obviously you can't play the game that way, so let's go ahead and get the buffer for the background. Buffer equals, we're gonna do get buffer actually, should I get the display here too? Why should the display be constant? Don't really want to get it each time, but I'd only be getting it once. I'm going to leave it alone for now. Let's see what we get. Let's do buffer.canvas 0, 0. See what we get. We should get fully redrawn screen, and as you can see, oh, well, it's not fully redrawn because the buffer hasn't actually been resized to fit the correct space, but you can see up at the top we have our tile sheet image in there. So just for that little space, we need to actually draw all those tiles to the buffer. So let's go ahead and resize the buffer to the appropriate size. I come over here to staydown.js. How am I going to do this? Probably with a for loop. Let's do for 256. So my world width is 256 pixels. That's never going to change. I should really take the constant for world width and pull it out into this scope. But for now, let's just hard code it. It's a mistake. This is going to lead to another refactoring video if I do this, but that's okay. X is going to be equal to 256 minus 16, which is the width of one of our tiles, so that's going to be 240. X is greater than -1. X minus equals 16, which is our tile width. For var y equals, it's not going to be the same thing, but let's do the same thing. 240, X is greater than -1. Oh, wait a minute. Y is greater than -1, Y minus equals 16. And essentially what we're doing is we're going to be bringing these X and Y positions through each space that a tile can occupy in our map. And before we even do this, we need to set up our buffer a little bit. So we need to set the width to 256. We need to set the height for now. We're just going to make it the full size of the screen. So we're also going to do buffers dot background. Don't know why I didn't think about that. Dot image smoothing enabled. We're going to set that to false. And also, while I'm thinking about this, let's go ahead and go to the run game state inside of the resize method and set the, oh, actually we can do that initialize because the size of our display buffer never actually changes. So let's also, before I forget to do this, do buffers.display dot image smoothing enabled equals false. And somewhere I'm setting the size of my display canvas. I think I'm doing that here. Where am I doing that? Am I doing that at the bottom of this file? It's a terrible idea. Look at that. I am. Okay. That's fine. Whatever. I'll take it out and I'll put it in the initialize function because we don't want to initialize the size of our display buffer canvas inside of the run game state. It's always going to be the same size, so you might as well set that size at the very beginning of the game. And the very beginning of the game happens with the initialize function. So we're going to do buffers.display.canvas, and instead of world width and world height, we're just going to do 256. 256. That's honestly almost a case for using a global variable. I know people say don't ever use global variables, but world width and world height as globals would actually be pretty handy. So I might have to do that. That might have to happen. In fact, do I really want to do that? I'm going to think about it. I'll probably have to go back and refactor this later, but for now, I'm going to use constants. I'm going to think about it. Next video, I might go ahead and implement something a little different, or I might just leave it. All right, so we're going to set up our display buffers dot display dot image smoothing enabled equals false. Okay, let's see what we get. It's looking pretty good. We got rid of the bottom there. The problem where it wasn't redrawing the bottom because we actually resized our background buffer to the appropriate size. Let's go through and draw some stuff to this. Okay, we're going to draw an image from the tile. We're going to randomize the tile each time. So random x equals math dot random times 3. Yeah, times 3. I think that should do it. Don't think I need to quote that. Times 16. Random x 16 x y 16 16. Save. Let's see what we get. Ooh, didn't work. 7 is not a valid argument count for any overload. Stay down, JS line 77. Okay, so we're drawing the tile image at a random x. Y is always going to be 0. 16. Oh, 7 is the number of parameters. Okay, so this is essentially what we're doing, because I forgot to mention this. We're trying to cut out randomly from this tile set one of these images. So we have an image here, an image in the middle, and an image on the far right. So we're going to just get a random index. So 0 to 2, 0, 1, 2. So that's going to be our random x. And we're going to multiply that by 16. So in the case that we come up with 0, we're going to get 0 times 16. It's going to give us this tile. When we get 1, it's going to be 1 times 16. It's going to be this middle tile. And when we get 2 as a random number, we're going to get 2 times 16, which is going to give us this tile over here, which starts at 32 pixels into the tile sheet. So let's see if we can fix the problem here. I'm getting a random number between 0 and 1. I don't think it ever actually reaches 1. It's between 0 and 1. So I don't know if it can ever be 0. I think it might be able to, but it can never be 1. So math.random never returns 1. It's always between 0 and 1, maybe including 0. This should work because we're never actually going to get 3. The biggest number we're going to get is 2. And what I'm forgetting is math.floor to clamp that to a whole number. Multiply by 16, see what we get. Hey, there we go. Let's take a look at that and see if it's actually randomized. I'm going to pick any row here and see if I can get a pattern that doesn't repeat. Huh, that looks pretty good, but I could have swore that I had this image. I changed this image a little bit. I think I'm using a slightly older image. I think I actually have a newer image, so next video I'm going to go ahead and import that because I have it on my other computer. But as you can see, we randomized the background because you can actually check the pattern. Like if you just follow the mouse here, we have little square, medium square, little square, medium square, little square, big square, big square. I guess it's not a square, but it's a rectangle. Basically it's randomized. Next video I'm going to come in and tweak that a little bit, but we now have a randomized tile background that we drew with a buffer. And the cool thing about the buffer is when I initialize the game by calling the initialize function, if we come back out to the HTML, we're calling the initialize function one time right here. If I come back in here, we're going to draw this buffer once. That means, I don't know how many tiles this is, but it's quite a few. We're going to draw them all on individually, and then inside of my run game state, when it's time to render these things, I'm just going to go ahead and draw the entire buffer just by calling this draw image function once. And this is great because the bottleneck for drawing with the HTML5 canvas is passing things to the GPU. So when you call draw image, it's going to send instructions. It's going to send your image. It's going to send the instructions. And that is a bottleneck. It's going to try to send those instructions. That's not very fast sending those instructions over. Once the GPU gets the image and the instructions, it's really fast. So if you're trying to send over, I don't know how many tiles this is, but let's say it's like 200. It can't be 256. Let's say it's 100 tiles. I'm probably way off here. Let's say we're passing 100 draw commands in. The bottleneck is going to be, there's going to be 100 bottlenecks. And then the GPU is going to get a tiny instruction and a tiny image to work with. This is just way faster because we're cutting out all of those bottlenecks of sending those instructions over one at a time to do each tile on every frame. And remember, we're operating, I think, at 30 frames a second, so we're going to be calling this 30 times a second. So drawing one big image 30 times a second, the GPU can draw really fast. It doesn't mind drawing a bigger image. What's slow is passing that information over to the GPU, and we're avoiding passing that information maybe like 100 times, however many tiles you have. We're avoiding that many passes of information to the GPU. I'm gonna speed some stuff up. So anyway, before I lose my voice, I'm gonna go ahead and close out this video. I know it was super long, a lot of refactoring, but it's gonna do the game some good, so it had to be done. Anyway, stay tuned for the next video. I'm gonna go ahead and sign out. See ya.